Well, thank you so much for making it to PSL. Obviously, this process is very near and dear to my heart. If you got a chance to see the webinar, obviously something I'm really passionate about. And, always excited to go out and teach this because I do think that all these principles are totally applicable to every new business. And I think here at PSL, it's something that's become a, tenet of our approach in really understanding, customer demand before we invest a lot of time and energy into building businesses that potentially people don't want, right? So I'm joined by the co-founder of PSL, Ben Gilbert.
So for the recording, we both have to pass the mic back and forth and speak into it, which is really funny because it's not amplifying in the room. So it feels odd to be speaking into a microphone that's not making us any louder. But Peter, we have to adhere to that.
Thank you. So Ben, Ben and I really collaborate on this. Ben's more on the VC side, thinking about what are good investments, where I'm sitting here, working with entrepreneurs on, what are the next opportunities that we're going to pursue. So, this is sort of part 2 in this process, which is just, okay, you run your validation. Like, how do you start to begin to understand, what do these numbers mean? Like, how can you look at this data and start to make investment decisions on, do I want to pursue this, keep going, or do I want to kill this idea and pivot? So, what we're going to do today is really just go through this process of after we've run these tests, how do we look at this and think holistically about the business based on the data that we're getting back. Really important. We're going to keep this quick. We want to make this really interactive. So plenty of time for Q&A, ask a lot of questions about your own business, share some of the data you've gotten back from your tests, and help us just, iterate with you and reflect upon that. So, this is really important to me, right? So, thinking holistically about validation data is just really at the core of it, right? So, good validation tests help you to understand demand, but you want to build a model, right? So you want to, when we do these tests, we're trying to get, good data in, good data out, meaning I want to put this data into the platform, by customer segment, by value prop. But what I want to get out of it wants to help me inform, is this a good business, the economics, the cost to get customers, the cost to scale, all the things that are really important from an investment decision, right? So if you think about it, what do these validation tests tell you? And this is why it's really important. They don't just tell you click-through rate or CPM, right? They tell you, how big is the market, right? These networks like Google and Facebook will actually tell you how many people do we think fit your criteria? How many people can you reach, right? So that's really important from an investment perspective to be sure that you have a big enough market, right? The second thing is just demand resonance with your concept. Like the great thing about these tests are you're able to quickly iterate and just learn, okay, does this customer segment that I'm putting a message in front of resonate with it? So at a very low cost testing capacity, you can learn so much, right? And the third thing is just, getting into the economics, like, how much is it going to cost me to get a click or cost per lead so that you can just really understand what's the budget required for me to scale, right? And the fourth thing is just, putting it all into a business model. So when you put all these numbers into, a spreadsheet, you can just understand, can I just systematically grow this business? Do the numbers, add up to a venture scale business? And this is just really important. And I think it's something where it takes the opinion out of a business and just turns it into facts.
Yeah, and I think 2 things that are interesting when you're thinking through this. One is the immature websites that you're driving traffic to now, as long as they have extremely clear value propositions, and in the ads you're being very clear about what value propositions you're testing, the numbers aren't going to be exactly the same when you have a very mature business and a full built out website and a beautiful brand and all the things that come with credibility, social signals, reviews. But they're surprisingly not going to be far off. I think we've learned to trust the process more than we initially thought that we could, because when we build a business for real 6 months after we run all these initial tests, the numbers actually hold pretty strong because people they either have an emotional resonance with a value proposition that solves a problem for them, or they don't. And I've been like, I think a year ago, if we were giving this talk, I'd be like, now here's some things I'd couch it with, but we've now seen it enough times where as long as you are, really, really rigid about here's the problem we're solving for you, and then later on, that is actually the problem you're solving, those numbers will hold over time. The other thing I would point out about the large, accessible, addressable market is, the way that people used to build pitch decks and then would put a market size thing is, well, Gartner said last year in their research report that XYZ was an X billion-dollar market and growing at a 10% compound annual growth rate. And like that still exists in lots of pitch decks. But one, that's a trailing indicator because that's what the market was 6 months after the researcher got paid lots of money to go and research that sector. So there had to be enough there for them to even commission research. But a lot of you are building emerging businesses. So when you're using Google Keyword Planner, when you're using Facebook's tools to basically, put your ideal customer profile in and try and target them, and it shows you that thermometer that isn't always totally accurate, but is accurate to some order of magnitude, it's a much more real-time gauge of demand than typically what the market size reports would have told you. So another good one is Google Trends, trying to see, how much have people searching for my problem changed in the last year. And I think when you're thinking about presenting this for investment, for people to join your team, for convincing anyone that your business is going to be a thing, it's always helpful to try and show a point of comparison. So here's the audience for my thing versus something else that is, not growing nearly as much as my thing. And I've been a huge fan of these sort of like real-time, being able to use this stuff for real-time market research.
Yeah, totally. And that's really, that's kind of the information hack of it, right? Like Google and Facebook is giving you this information for free. So it's really irresponsible not to make use of it. So I think, a fun thing that I always love to do is look at a few real world examples across B2C and B2B. So, with B2C, it's really like, how many users can you acquire efficiently at scale, right? It just really comes down to economics. People get misled in B2C because, the markets are always massive. It's just, you have this default, it's everyone, or it's these very large markets. But it's really, how much when I've led like growth teams for consumer startups, it's really how much can I get a click for? How much can I get a user for? And how much can I scale that up? So we're going to look at a couple examples to really help you work through that. So if you remember from the webinar, we looked at my favorite losing example, which is Airbnb for chefs. So you can see this is, as I mentioned in the webinar, we spent a few $100 over 10 days and got all this great data back from Facebook. So this is like out of the box data. You run these tests. I put my value props in front of, people on market segments like parents who travel, groups who travel, couples who travel, all things that are really easy to do. But what Facebook gives me back is just really holistic view into this market opportunity, specifically all data inputs that I can use to build a model, right? So as you can see, let's skip forward to the results, then we'll come back. Let's think holistically. So we can assume things like lifetime value of the customer, right? We can make an assumption saying, look, if I'm going to make, $10 per booking and they're going to do it 10 times a year, I can say that I'm going to make $100. So if we go back, we can start to do the math of if a customer is going to bring me $100 in revenue, how many customers do I need to make this a profitable business? So you can see, just the cost per lead alone. We ran this to over 120,000 people, right? And we get 3 people who want to download this app and become customers. I mean, it doesn't take, a statistician to know that this is not good. But the numbers are showing, so $85 for an email, right? So I can start to work backwards from, look, does this business scale at all? So from day one, I know what we're doing right now is not going to work. And then you also see all these trailing indicators, right? So it's like just the cost to reach these people is really informative. So, parents who do a lot of traveling, you can see that getting a click, starts to get up towards $3. So if I'm at a 0.3% click-through rate after reaching 25,000 people, and I'm going to spend $3 per click, you just quickly get a sense like you can't possibly scale this business, right? There's not enough people on the entire planet to become customers to make this business work. And so I think that, if you look at it, this is just how you can start to think about it. So is it a large addressable market? Yes, right? So Facebook is saying 2.6 million people meet your criteria. So just building an audience out of the box on Facebook, they're going to start to give you this information. But then, is there demand resonance with the concept? Absolutely not. Like we see incredibly poor resonance, right? With the value props. Is the cost of acquisition, effective? If I'm spending $175 to get an email with a revenue of $100 per customer, it's obviously not going to work, right? So if you just think about the value in that process, for spending a few $100s, I'm able to get really clear indications of success of a business that can it scale or not. I know that there's a big market. I'm able to test it, but I'm able to quickly learn that, if I get three customers out of 120,000 people, it's not a good business.
All right, so voice of the skeptic coming in to give more color on my previous comment. So large accessible addressable market. Well, I could reach a lot of people with my targeting, but was my targeting right? Like, no, there's clearly not a market for this at all, let alone a large market. And so when you're using the tools, where you're trusting how many people is Facebook willing to show my ads to, the other piece of the puzzle is, are people converting at a rate that I would expect? Am I correctly tapping the well? Because I can target if I'm trying to find Peter, and I'm targeting an enormous swath of 80-year-old women, and I'm like, there's a huge market. Well, I mean, there's not, because like Peter wasn't in there and he didn't click, and none of them clicked. And so it's important to sort of like when you're trusting this sort of data for market sizing instead of sort of research data, it's important to make sure that you're taking the dependency on, and we know we are targeting the correct people before we say how large that group of people is.
Yeah, and I think along those same lines, like that's the process, right? It's iterative. So if you're confident in your business, it's very cost effective to turn around and say, let me try different value props. Let me target different segments, right? So I think that's why this process is so important. It's not meant to be discouraging. It's meant to give you, rapid data and feedback about a segment and a value prop, and quickly iterate towards, can you find success in those segments? So I thought, let's look at one of my favorite examples of success is really Boundless. So Boundless is a company that we tested on Google. So people searching for help on immigration. Boundless is like a TurboTax for immigration product. So you can start to see, much different outcomes, right? Now, it's important to say that Boundless is a, $500 off-the-shelf product. So when I start to see data like this, where people searching for help on spousal visas, I'm able to quickly reach 20,000 people searching for that. I get 781 clicks at $1 each for a $500 product. It's a 4% click-through rate. I can start to see how that can scale, right? So when I have, millions of searches for immigration support over the year, and I'm going to get a 4% click-through rate, and I'm going to get emails for less than $4, now you start to see this is a venture scale business, right? Go ahead. Well, I think, again, you have to model it out. So it's like how many people are actually, potential customers for your product. So if you're getting X, percent click-through rate, what's the LTV of that customer? How much does it cost you to acquire that? You can quickly kind of do, back of the napkin math to understand, based on the number of people that Google or Facebook is telling me are in this market, how many people do I need to acquire to make this a profitable business?
Yeah, and to put some numbers on that, there are all sorts of exceptions to this rule, but you should start to get concerned if your cost to get a paying customer is not about 3 times or greater. It's not about 1/3 or less than your lifetime value. CAC to LTV ratio. Yeah, not by any means a hard and fast rule, but yeah, it feels like a good sort of finger in the air. And then similarly on payback period, if it's going to take longer than a year after, getting someone after you spending money to market to them for them to actually pay and sort of pay back. If it's a subscription product, if it takes 5-6 times of them, continually reordering your product or something like that, not great. Ideally, it pays back the first time. Lots of products these days don't do that, and that's okay. But you kind of want that payback period to be sub 6 months in your model too. The other thing that I think is interesting about this data to look at is the cost per lead, as you can see, is $386. Really important to note that that's wildly different than the cost to acquire the customer. And especially in e-commerce, anybody that's building a Shopify-based system, the consumer behavior these days is to add to cart as a save rather than add to cart as intent to purchase. So there's going to be one more massive multiple on top. And so you want to make sure to consider that as you don't want to throw cost to acquire a customer into your model at 386 if this were, a direct to consumer opportunity. You want to make sure that there's one more step after that. Likely that's only going to convert at 5, 10, maybe 15% after a cart ad, unless, your business is very old and you've built up a lot of maturity and a lot of sort of social signaling around your product that it's legit, and people are much more likely to actually check out the things they put in their cart.
And the last thing that, I'll add really quickly on this slide that I really love is just, it starts to inform your go-to-market, right? So as you can see, these are the first set of tests that we ran over the first month of Boundless, right? We quickly learned that, look, spousal visas is just a great opportunity. Just the economics speak for itself. But then as you can see, naturalization is the close second, which is, the second product offering that Boundless went and pursued. So there's just so much learning and so much value in doing this because you just really get, this real-time insight into the minds of your customers. So, in conclusion, again, same type of thing. Here I have all greens, right? So large market, absolutely. So I've got 1.2 million people searching for this. So like I mentioned in the webinar, Facebook is really about putting display ads in front of people, little billboards in front of specific segments and getting their reaction. Google is really about capitalizing on intent, right? So people are looking for this. Can you convert these people into leads? Can you really establish a channel? Can you find resonance with what you're marketing? And so I think Ben's absolutely correct, like the cost per lead, but when you have it at $4, it just tells a great story, right? So if I have, audience in the millions and I can get really high intent users in my funnel for $4, I can turn that into a business. And, if I have a $500 product that I'm able to get $4 leads in an audience in the millions, I can grow that business, right? And I can grow that business because I know that people who are searching for something are resonating with my ads. I see that in my click-through rate. It's cost effective to get those people to my landing page, and they're interested enough to go forward. So the whole metaphor, it's just always thinking about, good data in, good data out, using these platforms as tools to really tell this story that says, look, it's not my opinion that Boundless is a good business. It's the market's opinion. That's really what's compelling here, right? It's a fact. It's not an opinion. So, I thought it'd be important to talk about B2B. So it's like, can you acquire a critical mass of your customers? Like, can you reach those people, right? This is also what's really important. So, B2B products, you might have $50,000 to $100,000 ARR, like annual revenue. So it's not like I need to go out there and say, look, I've got like 20 million customers and I can get 1 million of them. It's, can I, get enough people in my pipeline to, get a critical mass and really start somewhere and grow that audience. So, I thought this was a really cool example. We have this company called Attunely, which is like machine learning for debt collections. It's one of those things that's like, really, really niche. So the reason I bring up this example is because that nicheness is what I love about this, because it proved that we could actually go out for something so specific to such a specific segment and prove, like, do they want this or not, right? So there's, I think, 4,100 collection agencies in the US. So we're able to target, 1,384 owners of collection agencies with a value prop of machine learning will help increase your revenue, right? And, I was even like sort of skeptical of this at first. Like, wow, these are like collection agencies and who knows where. I don't really know that much. And this, again, just proves like when people resonate with a value prop and you get it in front of the right person, you see the numbers move. So here we get, this is just on Facebook, a 4.6% click-through rate on this at, $1 click. And we're able to get, 4 leads. We put these ads out for a week. The 4 leads, collection agency owners were like early adopters of this for, $16 a lead. And then the other thing that was interesting is that the people who work there, and this is also why it's really important to get this segmentation in your approach, because it's not only, owners, but people actually doing the work. Are they interested? Are they going to be advocates of these tools in the workforce? And, we tested that in front of, nearly 4,500 people. And we saw even better results. So I think, just as somebody like me who's been like an entrepreneur and started businesses, not only is it really important because it just tells a really rich story that, look, people in the collection space really want this type of a product. They really want some type of artificial intelligence to help them increase their revenue. But it also built a lot of conviction for me as, an entrepreneur to say, like, I know that people want this. I'm really going to persevere and build this product because I know from the market that they want it. And I know that I have the economics to really scale this business. So if you just think about it from your own sort of like wind in your sails, that's where data really becomes really powerful, is you yourself believe in that story and it really drives you forward.
I mean, there's like thunder that is all Peter's, that just because you're not saying it, I want to say it. It is crazy how much you've figured out with all of our companies that you can reach these like hard to reach B2B buyers that would never pick up the phone or answer an email when you send it cold to their work email, because they get 50 cold emails from random people who want to be service providers for their business every day. We all get them. You don't answer them. However, these people are all on Facebook and Instagram. And if you can figure out ways to reach them, like proxies for, their job description or what they do or where they work, you can reach them through their personal lives and still influence their business decisions. And I think it is amazing how you can still use Facebook, Google, Instagram, all these tools for B2B buyers, even though you're targeting it as a consumer, and actually way cheaper. So.
And I think that's the thing for, my own sort of process is, look, when people resonate with the pain, they click. It doesn't matter if they're on Facebook or, or Instagram or looking at pictures of their family. When you hit like a pain point, they engage. And that's what's, so powerful about just really leveraging these networks is it's just binary, right? So it's been time and time again, we've sort of like, is this really, it's like, is this true? And it's like, once somebody sees something that they really resonate with, the needles jump. So that's the fun part for me, is like going into these things and saying, no one's going to click on this, and just seeing massive engagement or being super confident, like I was for Airbnb for chefs. Just kidding. So again, just, this is a business that we went out and is funded, just like Boundless, raised venture rounds. So these are real examples of businesses that we've gone out through this process, raised venture rounds. And, coincidentally, both Boundless, really successful company, just continues to grow every single month over month. And the same thing is true for Attunely. And, one last sort of like anecdote that I loved is, for Boundless, it's more obvious. It's more of a broad consumer, offering. But for Attunely, they're in this really niche space. And what was cool is, we tested all these value props. So it was like, increasing revenue. And the other thing that really popped was on compliance. So like, there's all these regulations about, if you call somebody and their child answers the phone and you're like, hey, look, your parents owe us $150,000. That's a violation of by the FCC, right? So there's all these rules and regulations about how people can actually collect the money. So the second value prop that just popped off the charts was around compliance. And we put it in there because we read this report from McKinsey about compliance automation and how it was starting to trend in, financial and regulated industries. The cool thing is it was close to revenue because everybody likes more money. But when Attunely went out into the market, the first conference they went to, they made up these white papers, which was talking about increasing your revenue and increasing your compliance. And those were the main discussions. Everybody wanted more revenue, but the very close second was everybody really wanted compliance technology to empower their business. So it's just really incredible to me to see these low cost, efficient tests going out and actually getting real signal, where in the real world, it was absolutely corroborated. And when they started to enter this market, they were already very intelligent about the demands that their customers were seeking. Yes. Oh.
Yeah.
Correct. So
question was, admins still seem like a pretty cheap lead. Why is that not just as good, since the lifetime value is so high?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, one, at most of these agencies, sort of the buyer is the owner. So I was, you're directly connecting with the buyer, the product, the decision maker. But I was also really excited. This was actually great for me, knowing that I even had that, advocate the person actually doing the work. Sure. But actually the admin to me is equally exciting, knowing that like up and down the organization, the people using these tools are excited by it as well. So
I think importantly, make one other point too. My natural inclination is to sell. So like I will try and make the best ad. I'm like, I want to make the highest performing ad, and I'm going to put all the value props in it. And I'm going to like use all the most like emotional language that I can to really make people feel like this is for them. And that's great once you're onto something. But in this discovery phase, like you always drill it into me. We'll do one ad that's like, get more revenue for your, and then another one that's like, improve your compliance by 46% and save on time that you normally spent on compliance. And it's like, just be like robotic about it so you can actually get a good apples to apples comparison. Sorry, question. Yeah. Yeah. So the question's about using Facebook targeting for really niche things like people's professions and things like that. Dr. Spartan.
Yeah. So one, I would say like over the last 5 to 10 years, as this stuff has emerged, Facebook actually allowed you to, buy lists, import those as what they call custom audiences through like, there was like the American Association of Credit or something like this. So becoming a member gave you access to a list and you can feed that in. The other thing that we actually innovated on that I really love is you can do hyper-specific geolocation targeting. So I don't know if you saw the webinar where we talked about it, where you can actually drop a pin on a building, and those pins are like a 1 kilometer minimum radius, but then you can kind of exclude around the building. So what you end up with is like an isolated building in which Facebook can only serve ads in those locations, right? And so then we build these audiences of like, all the locations at which these people, their headquarters. So we get that list and we programmatically draw these pins, and then we serve ads to only those locations. And then we layer on the interest, which is like business owner, all the sort of out of the box stuff that helps you like, sort of complete that audience definition. And then we exclude, when we want to find the admins, those are like people working in the collections industry, which is out of the box on Facebook, but then we exclude the owners. So yeah, like I think that some of this stuff, there's some level of creativity. At the same time, like you can actually reach people. Like sometimes it takes some digging, but 9 times out of 10, specifically with the geo, if you know where people work, you can totally achieve it that way. And that's been really powerful for us because it just allows us to isolate on, hey, if we know where people work, we can target 500 companies, and we know that people are in those buildings and all are the people seeing this ad. So it's become sort of our de facto way of achieving that.
Also, to get into price arbitrage again, conferences are incredible because let's say buying a booth and putting up your sign costs 20 grand to be an exhibitor in some conference hall, and like then you have to dedicate all your time to go there, and you have to do all that face to face, and you have to like talk to, like it's a very expensive operation. Or you could have a digital billboard that's on every conference attendee's phone for those 3 days. And you know that all people that are in that convention center for those 3 days, like if you're a B2B business and that's your target buyer, it's like, oh my God, they all convene in one place for 3 days and I can put a thing on their phone, and it's way cheaper than buying a booth. So it's like, thank you, conference organizers, for getting all of the people together so I could target them on Facebook. It's crazy that what it lets you do. So yeah. Oh yeah, this is my slide. So the thing that Peter always yells at me for, which is the right thing to yell at me for, is when people ask me, hey, what's a good click-through rate? Or what's a good on-page conversion rate? And I'm like, well, let me ask Peter sort of what like this.
It gives you clarity. One, by doing this, you're by definition understanding exactly who your customer segments are, right? And that is a huge triumph. So many people come in and are very confused about it's women, right? That is not a customer segment. You need to be really specific about who is your customer, right? And what is their day-to-day life look like? Why do they want this product? How does it make their life better, right? So if you remember in the webinar, it was all like, what are the pains and the gains of using my product, right? So be specific and test specific value props against people and really get, granular about the story that you tell. And at the end of the day, you're going to take, a 30-minute meeting of a lot of noise, and you're going to turn it down into a 5-page deck that just really communicates a clear vision about an opportunity in the market that is proven by data. So that's it.
So we thought a fun thing to do would be if anybody did run some ads and did do some tests to talk through your data as sort of a case study and working session, if anybody's open to it. And if not, then we could just do Q&A. Oh, cool. Yeah. It can be finicky to like get started on. Awesome.
And then we were also trying to test therapists because they had huge Facebook groups. I couldn't get the Facebook groups the ads for the therapists to launch at all. It just was, so I don't know why I had the budget that it was still Facebook. But I can pull up the numbers that we had, but like if you get in our game right now is for free, so that was the other thing. We weren't charging anything. We were just trying to see if we could use to a general outreach, and I think it was like 40 cents to get someone to download, but I'm not sure if they actually downloaded. I can't figure out the numbers. We have all this data. I'm not really sure what we actually spent 30 cents to. But like on the table, it's like 40 cents or something like that. You got
40 cents for an app install ad is really cheap.
Yeah, and I got like 2 installs, and I was only like a couple hundred people or something. I don't know. I don't understand how to read those metrics, really. I stared at it for a long time. And I'm like, you know what, it's kind of irrelevant because we're going to charge at some point. It's probably going to be more accurate. One, we need to have our whole experience more upgraded. And then 2, we've got to put that paywall up because that's going to be a significant viewership for that people are going to stop. Right? But I was just trying to figure out, could I even reach someone who's got mental health issues? Searching and finding them through, it's just basically, I didn't do Google Ads or anything else. But I can show you
We've definitely got enough based on that so far for a good discussion. If that's, yeah.
I can look up the figures.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a couple of high level things I can say based on everything so far. So the point you raised for folks at home is that you have a mental health video game. You tried marketing it to a group of men, a group of women, and a group of therapists, private therapists. Huh.
We're trying to figure out this app conversion, so we try to sell direct apps, very hard to monetize.
Yeah.
Especially because it's so stigmatized with like mental health.
Right.
And so I was just trying to figure out, because I've done numbers and like, your customer acquisition cost, like maybe $8, but the most I can charge based on other consumer apps is like $10, like $100 a year is like the most I can charge, right? They're all moving this 1-year subscription model. So then it's like, and we were running these numbers, and I was like, this isn't even sustainable in any way. So I need to get my numbers for my account.
Yeah.
The enterprise side is completely different.
Right.
$100,000 contract.
Yeah. What was the? Totally. Yeah, I would say, so first of all, any app, whether you're charging for it or not, I mean, even like free to play games, if you're getting an app install for less than $2 is like somehow really catching people's attention. The Yeah.
Or that we want to see what was the next day.
Right. Right. Because you don't know what message is going to resonate emotionally with people. The one thing that I have noticed, and so here we are giving this hour-long presentation on the virtue of using Facebook for validation, which I think is amazingly directionally correct. It gives you really good signal on, is this value prop interesting versus that value prop? Is this business, do people have any interest versus, a lot of interest? What you have to be careful of is, are you signing up for your business to be on a treadmill where you have to acquire every single one of your customers from Facebook? And if so, that's a really, really hard to sustain thing. And so what we try and do pretty early is and this is extremely hard to do until you launch a product. So this really isn't in validation. If you guys can figure out a way to pull it into validation, we should definitely chat. But figuring out basically what your organic conversions are going to be and what blend of paid versus organic you're going to do, because and we're seeing it especially in the direct to consumer, CPG type products. If you have to go hand to hand acquire every single person on Facebook, it's a long road ahead, and you want your product should have some hook where people are telling other people about it. Otherwise, you're just completely beholden to these platforms, and your business could be sunk as if they ever change the algorithm, or if you're unable to target those people, or they remove one feature, and it just gradually gets more expensive over time. I mean, Facebook has ratcheted from organic reach all the way to basically, if you want to hit anybody, you're paying for it now. So, let's praise the virtues of this as a validation tool, but be very wary of it as a sustainable customer acquisition tool. No. People are leaving Facebook and going to Instagram and seeing all the exact same ads. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. What has taken a huge hit is display ad networks. So because of ad blockers and a lot of the privacy regulations, the ad networks can't track you effectively around other non-Facebook properties as they used to. So the efficacy of being able to do any sort of targeting on that is really rough. But since Facebook's entirely a closed ecosystem, they've got you pixeled everywhere. They're really good at showing you targeted ads. Anything else?
Yeah. I would say one thing that's so important, and I would go back and I would look at your data. It's just informing all those downstream marketing activities. So for us, it isn't about, just seeing these value prop resonance. Then if I go into acquisition mode, then I actually know what resonates with people. So before I go and write a bunch of articles about throwing mud at the wall for content marketing, I can actually be really direct and say, this one value prop resonated the most. Let me go write 4 articles about this. Let me start to rank on Google organically so that I can get free traffic and then learn to convert those people. So I think also think about the validation, not just understanding if people want something or not, but let that inform all your downstream activities that become much more expensive. So getting a good article written is going to be $400 to $500, right? You want to be really sure that you're creating content that people want. That's why it's also important to go look at the Google side of the house, where you're understanding what are the trends in searches, so you can be really specific in, okay, I'm going to pay up front. If you look at it balanced, first 6 months, I'm going to pay for those users. 6 months from now, I want that CAC to be blended, where a lot of those people are coming in through organic, content that I've created, so I don't have to pay.
It's I think we see this time and time again. You can get your costs down by a factor of 2, maybe 3. You're not going to get them down by an order of magnitude. And it's just a helpful sort of heuristic to keep in mind. If I do a good job of my, organic paid blended being 50-50, that's going to bring down all these costs by a factor of 2. Maybe I'll get some incremental amount better at Facebook ads, so that'll come down maybe by a factor of 2. But the thing that you're not going to get is oh my God, it was $20 and now it's $2. It's hard to do that much better. Yeah. Yeah, Anne.
And so where the struggle really is, you have to compute it with how long to let this test go. And then also the landing business accessories, so it's some custom mix, so.
Yeah.
For example, the high competition, on the carrot, I have a lot of expendable income courses, we do create a custom landing page course that is used that audience based on the ad. And we're just getting some of these things ready, and we're using our email signups. We know people are listening, we haven't really done something.
Yeah.
Quite the way you think we should yet, but, what do you think about custom landing pages and really trying to convert really, not just for the ads, but really leverage it.
Yeah. So the question is how long to let Facebook ads run, and then how what's our philosophy on highly targeted landing pages? So I'll let Peter answer the first question. On the targeted landing pages, I've seen when people take a generic landing page, such as come use this generic loyalty program at any restaurant. Let's say the conversion rate for that business is 5%. I've seen people get in the 15 to 20% by doing vertical specific, hey, so-and-so who I know lives in this area in this city, or, for a small business tax software, hey, so-and-so who is a plumber, and being able to create like a whole microsite or a skinned version of your homepage that's specifically for that person that, gives them the confidence that once they've arrived via an ad at your landing page, that it's for them. That really makes a difference and can be sort of a 3 or 4 X on conversions. Yeah, let me get Peter's thoughts on length, campaign length.
Yeah, so I think one, you want to make it statistical, right? So if you're reaching people in the tens or the hundreds, you want to get into the thousands. And this depends on the audience, the market size, right? But for me, it's just all about, is my data good, right? So I don't want to get 1 click out of 10 and say it's 10% click-through rate. And then the other thing is everything's cyclical by nature in marketing. So, at least a week, if not a couple weeks, so that you're going to see Monday behaves much different than Thursday. That's just true. The same way that Q1, we're going into Q4. So all the advertising money in the world is going to be spent over the next 3 to 4 months, and it's going to drive up the cost. That's going to skew your numbers, right? So being aware of that is just, that is human nature, and that is always true. I want to talk a little bit about the personalization. There's nothing more. This is now we're entering the phase of marketing of personalization, right? So every company in the world on the marketing side is like, how can we make ads, landing pages, app experiences, the content that we put in front of you more and more relevant and more signal, less noise. So they're going to just raise the bar for what consumers believe. So you're going down absolutely the right path, making these dedicated landing pages, make it as specific as you possibly can, right? You don't have to be like incredibly narrow, but like if you're targeting a certain age group, make all the imagery, make it very relevant and put that imagery in the ads, make that entire experience relevant. We've run tests here where we've run ads to, hundreds of thousands of people, and every single cohort, males 18 to 25, 25 to 30, all saw a different aged person relative to them in their ads. And it was 130% lift over just showing a generic person in the ad. So consumers really, really respond to that stuff. And again, it's just more customer empathy. It's just me doing more work to understand who my customer is and putting in the effort to actually speak to them. So I think just from a philosophical standpoint, always going to pay you dividends. Yeah.
So, just like for context, there are over 24 different versions I tested with different imagery, different targeting, again, I didn't know what I was doing, so I don't know how that was. It ran from October 19th to November 6th. There were so the call to action was download the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was an interesting learning because we didn't see any direct downloads, which I think it helped us understand there's a different buying process for this particular solution. It's not an immediate thing, but if they're really struggling, they're going to want to research. There's a research phase to this.
Mm-hmm.
Save, people are paying, who's recommending. So what we did see though is when we went through the call to action
Mhm.
And because what we did see is though during that same time period, is we're not doing any SEO optimization, we're not actively doing anything else, so we made the assumption that they download and saw came from these ads that we built.
Mhm.
So it was a whopping $24 I spent on this. I had $1,000 budget. Impressions were 1,494.
Mhm.
All
How amazing is that? That for $14 you can use that.
$21.
$21 you can use 14.
Yeah, 1,500. So yeah. Right. Okay. So downloads reported on the Google and iTunes was 66. It was evenly split on both platforms. The registered users. So I even with one version of it, and not the downloads, but they actually go through our very painful registration process. We did 45 clinical questions.
Are
We
you
have to
offering people
answer.
free money?
And it was a free app. It was so they were paying with their time versus money, right? 38 registered users. All clicks were 70. People, all of the click through rate, so all of the ads was 4.69%. So for cost per click was 39.
Yeah.
Cost per registered user, which was the ones that actually go through the whole thing, I calculated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would run that campaign all day.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know if that was good.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, and nobody in healthcare does it. Nobody in healthcare is running ads to direct you to healthcare. I've heard about it a ton, and I don't know if it's
Yeah. It would be like if we were to run those tests, I think we'd be building the app right now and building a bit.
I need help.
Yeah.
I need help with getting customers done.
Do you want to recap some of those?
Yeah. So I'll recap. So from what I heard was 1,400 impressions, 1,500 impressions, 38 registered users. So yeah, and how many downloads?
And that was the download 66.
66. Yeah. So one, incredible that the cost per install CPI is that low. You just don't see that anymore. So that's actually where you're sort of you're beating the benchmarks by a very statistically significant amount. So that's like, and then the fact that you got 50% of people to go through this clinical onboarding, that knowing that all of these things you could probably improve is just, I would say, absolutely giving you a signal that there's demand for sure. I think next step I would go back and I would look at, okay, which of these ads perform the best? My guess is if you actually look at the ads, there'll be one winner that really, really won, far and away from the other ones. And that Facebook continued to serve that because they saw such good results. And I would launch those again. I would continue to understand,
I don't want to take up time. I want to finish.
Yeah.
Because by the time I was doing this report, I was still doing that. So thank you.
yeah, of course.
All right. Well, I think that wraps us for the presentation part. Let's grab food and chat a little bit more. Thank you.